What's up, guys? So today, chapter 5 of the road to the Olympia 2022, where Terrence will take that title. I will tell you all about our awesome arm day right after you do the YouTube thing. Like, subscribe, share. The channel has been growing. It's been growing at a faster pace thanks to you guys. So I always appreciate the comments, the shares, the thumbs up, all that good stuff. Because again, I have a lot of people telling me this channel should be bigger, and I appreciate the people doing something about it. So enough of that mess, doing the thing I gotta be doing. I'm begging for subscriptions and likes, as some people would tell me. But anyway, moving on to arm day. So arm day, arguably one of the more important days in mine and Terrence's split. One, I have these super long monkey arms. That again they drag, my knuckles drag on the ground when I walk sometimes. So I've pretty much had small arms my entire life, relatively speaking. And I've got them to points in time where they're at least not that embarrassing. I'd never say they're really big, but they're at a point now where I feel like they're not that embarrassing, just semi-embarrassing. And that should be a goal. For most normal people out there, again, I've had some videos jokingly saying, hey, get arms like Phil Heath, which a lot of people seem as a good thing to advertise. In reality, my advertisement is get arms that are not that embarrassing, because if you're watching this, odds are your arms don't grow easily like mine, so you gotta scratch and claw and fight for every half a centimeter that you can put on them. So anyway, same for me, same for Terrence. Arms are not a strong body part. Terrence's this last year were pretty much close to on the money, but again, it's one of those body parts because of how big his back, his chest, and his delts are. He really can't have too big arms. And we really, there's something to be said, you know, classic is, the division now is its own thing, but we are trying to obviously more closely emulate the historically more similar time was the 80s and the 90s. And for whatever reason, those guys had big arms. And so again, really his arms can't be too big. So going through this session today, I'm gonna discuss a little bit of exercise selection. Some of the things are the same that I've had in for a long time. A couple I've rotated out. I'm gonna try and give you guys a couple little tips as we go along as well too, as far as hopefully some stuff that's different. I'll say that basically, I don't like to be different for the sake of different. At the same time, I don't like to say the same stuff you guys have heard me or other people say on YouTube a billion times. So hopefully give you a little bit of some insightful stuff that can actually help your training. So pretty much everything today, this is a perfect example. When I first went through our split and kind of did a little overview of it, because I want triceps to be a little bit more of a priority for Terrence, I put all the tricep stuff first, straight sets, and then all the bicep stuff after that. After going through it twice, it pissed me off how long it took my arm day to go. So today I reverted to doing supersets. And that's the thing I always compare is having 2 or 3 weeks of straight sets compared to supersets now. Actually didn't have any drop off in performance throughout the workout and actually progressed on most lifts. So that's really a gauge. I have people asking me, should you do straight sets? Should you do supersets? Well, you gotta try both and see what works best for you. And so considering that I was still able to progress on lifts and considering it pissed me off less, that's a win. So if people wanna know, well, how did you decide to superset? Mainly so I'm not as pissed off for how long the workout is taking. So first pairing, I always kind of go with some of the more isolation stuff for triceps before I'm involving other joints. And pretty much everything today before I go, you guys will see in more detail, I'll explain the exercises. But really the structure of the workout for everything was 2 working sets, top set, back off set. People ask, why do I do that sometimes? There's nothing magical about it. It really has come more from application. It's the thing I've been able to produce the best results with athletes, with myself, and the thing that I'm able to coach and help people's performance on the best. Because other set structures, although all that really matters is you're training close to failure for however many working sets you're doing. And from there, whether you want to do a similar rep range or a similar weight the whole time or whatever, honestly doesn't make that big of a difference. So for me, comes to a coaching preference, it's an easy way for me to have people picking their weights, progressing their weights, still hitting some broader rep ranges. And again, if people can perform and progress on it well, that's the most important thing you need to determine when doing set structure. And if you can do some other stuff, like I said, train close to failure, train some broad rep ranges, I think that's also important stuff as well too. So everything you'll see today was 2 working sets. And at some point in time, as off season goes along, recovery's in a good spot, might taper those up a little bit, but that's about it. So arm day, and again, this is a priority for myself and Terrence. If you look over now, being that this is chapter 5, you have our whole split. So if you're gonna ask what my split is, before you ask, just look yourself. You can look through chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you'll have our entire split. We're taking 2 off days during the week, so it's 5 days of training, 2 days off. And you'll see again, we do have some more arm work in on some of the other days as well too. So this isn't it, but you'll see this is how we're keeping again arms a priority from their own day, getting pushed to start the workout, and at the same time have a little bit higher frequency than other stuff. So here we go, enjoy. All right, guys, 2 quick tips on preacher curls. The quick tips that I'm going to give are 1, explaining why I pretty much never use the seat when I'm doing any preacher curl, and then 2, a way that you can do a curl and hopefully feel your biceps more and less other elbow flexor stuff, because those are 2 things that I get often. I'm not gonna get too much in detail. If you look back, preacher curl variations are always my favorite. There's an alignment, there's a bracing, there's a profile standpoint, so that's why I choose these. Almost always these will be in my program. But these are some things that I get questions on and people mess up. So 1, showing you the seat thing. I see very often people, you know, the position that you want, we're trying to train your biceps. So basically, obviously you want your upper arm in a position, your shoulder blade in a position, so all that can stay still and we can just train what we're supposed to train. People sometimes just come and don't even think anything about the seats, and either 1, they'll sit down too low, and so if you sit down too low, this is the most common thing that I'll see. You get this big space here. If you really want the bracing of the exercise to get all the benefit of it, you want to smash down as much upper arm contact on the pad as you possibly can. So the too low thing, this is the most common thing that I see happening. Same time, if people have it way too high, sometimes I see people, and you can still almost get in the right position way too high, but either way too high, 1, you have the lower part of your upper arm touching and not as much contact here. So you would want more contact just to be more stable and braced. Or sometimes people get themselves slouched all the way over. They're up so high, they kind of really protract their shoulder blade and they kind of stretch everything over here. So even if you have good contact with the upper arm, you might have your shoulder blade so protracted that you might not be in a strong, stable position. I don't think there is a position you have to be in as far as your shoulder blades are concerned. Some corrective nerds that have taken 1 too many corrective certifications that are shit will tell you that, oh, you always have to have your shoulder blades retracted and everything, which is idiotic. But you should have them in a stable spot. So reality, fully retracted probably is not going to be as stable as somewhere kind of in the middle. The same reason fully protracted is not going to be as stable as somewhere in the middle. So anyway, I think about what upper arm position do I want. So generally I just stand. That way if I want to go a little bit lower, I just go a little bit lower. If I want to go a little bit higher, I just stand a little bit higher and just make really quick adjustments as opposed to just going where the seat goes. So I just get in and I feel like this is the contact position that I want, get as much upper arm contact as I can on the pad, and then make sure I feel like I'm in a good stable position, and don't let my lower body dictate the position I'm trying to have my upper arm in. So that's tip 1. Tip 2, if you have a hard time feeling your biceps and you have some other stuff around your elbow joint that tends to feel like it's working a lot, an easy thing I always say is incorporate a little bit of a component of supination. So this is a cue or a tip that can help you feel your biceps more. So this isn't, everyone doesn't need to do this. If you can just do elbow flexion and feel your biceps, great, you might never need to do this. If you're trying to get your biceps feeling more and you get to a point where this is really helpful, you might not to keep this in forever. So 1 is just adding in a component of supination. So really when you're going down, you can actually let the dumbbell, so if this is a pretty supinated position, I'm gonna let it pronate a little bit. So again, this will be maintaining that position. This is allowing a little bit of pronation. And as I curl, I'll actually initiate with a little bit of supination. So I go from this pronation to actually turn, so hopefully you guys can see this. I'll do a little bit more dramatic. I'll supinate first and then elbow flex. So go from this pronated, you know, someone's gonna call this a more neutralist position, supinate as I curl. And that can help bias the biceps because they're elbow flexors and supinators. And the other thing you can even do to feel it more is you can always offset the dumbbell. So again, if I offset some of the dumbbell, depends on basically the size of your hands, the size of the dumbbell. I can even wrap my thumb a little bit here just to get a little bit more space. But what this does, now the axis of rotation that I've created is in my wrist here. This wants to pull me into pronation. So to prevent this from pulling me into pronation now, because more weight is offset to the side, I have to actively supinate as I curl. So 1, whether you're actively supinating concentrically, or now I'm holding this amount of supination with an isometric. So again, if I just relaxed my muscles and supinate, I would go like this. So I actually have to hold the component of supination the whole time. So basically you could curl just holding that position, and that can help you feel the biceps more, or you can do the same thing where you allow it to pronate a little bit at the bottom, initiate with some supination, and then curl. So basically all that you're doing there is, aside from having the dumbbell pulling you into elbow extension, in which case you have to concentrically contract your elbow flexors, you're now actually having that dumbbell pull you into pronation, and you have to actively contract your supinators if you want that hand to pull out of pronation. So 2 tips that I just want to get into, aside from staying the same crap that everyone says over and over with preacher curls. So something a little bit different, but also different, not just making up random shit, hopefully some stuff that will actually help you guys and explain why I do some of the things that I do. So just a random thought, I thought I'd actually clarify a little bit on this. It's one of these things where I've been doing some of the things I've been doing for so long, I just keep doing them, knowing why I've done them, but maybe I haven't even said out loud in a long period of time why that is. So just want to clarify one thing. You'll see on some of my warm-up sets, sometimes, I'll do full range of motion. I'll perform the exercise exactly the way that I'm going to do my working sets. But sometimes you'll see me pause. Like I might pause at the end, I might pause at the top. I might do some partial reps randomly. So I might just go part way down, then part way back up. I might pause even in the middle, part way back up. I might go all the way down and then just do partial reps. So the purpose of that, and I think a lot of people actually just do that by feel, and lots of times, if you know the internal feeling you're looking for, that's a good thing. But I think from the outside, it can actually be a good practice for some people to implement, because there is this whole balance. I get people ask all the time, it's like, what's more important, good form or lifting as heavy as I can? And the answer that people don't like is you need to do both. And that's why getting big is hard. If you could just do one or the other, it would be very, very easy. But doing both is always a tough balance. So the thing that I say a lot of people do mess up on is when you're doing your warm-up sets, that's the time to kind of overdo good form. You should be practicing things. It should be very done intentionally with purpose, of like you're actually not just, okay, now I gotta do 10, now I gotta do 8, now I gotta do whatever. You don't gotta do anything, but if you're actually practicing the way you wanna do things and kind of rehearsing some of the things that you know maybe you're likely to mess up when things get hard, because that's the challenge, right? As soon as you have your heaviest weight and things are actually painful, you get further into a set, things get more painful. Basically, you have everything, whether it's conscious or subconscious, telling you to cheat, to bounce, to go quicker, to do whatever. And so what I'm doing the whole time, it's kind of should go without saying, but whenever you're doing an exercise, the whole point is to use the trained muscle. People get into time under tension on that. I understand the purpose of that, but more than time under tension, just go with the even simpler version that doesn't have to sound too nerdy or sciencey. You should be using your muscle the whole time. That's the bottom line, right? Should you use it just on the way up? Should you drop it on the way down? No. Should you bounce it out of the bottom? No. Should you whatever? So yes, technically more time under tension is good, but let's just even simplify it to my meathead brain even a little bit better. Using your muscles the whole time is good. So all that I'm doing with some of these parts is I'm just making sure I'm actually using my muscle, right? So again, if you can't stop at some point in time, at any point in time during an exercise, you're probably not actually using the muscle. And so again, I lots of times practice where most people mess up, make sure am I actually finishing with a good hard contraction, or am I just kind of letting the weight come up? Am I actually finishing having ownership of lowering the weight, pausing on the bottom, initiating that motion with the actual muscle? So that's kind of the reason why I do some of those little pauses as I'm going along in there. It's just to make sure, one, can I stop it at any point in time? Am I actually using the muscle, or is basically the weight using me? That sounds like a good catchphrase. It's, are you using the weight, or is the weight using you? We'll put that on a t-shirt. And but anyway, and that's really the check. Can you stop it? And again, then I practice the places where most people mess up, right? If you start the exercise right and you finish the exercise right, you're very unlikely to lose it in the middle as well too. So just a random thing, if some people are like, oh, why is he doing full reps somewhere? Why is he doing these little partial reps somewhere else? Again, I probably actually started doing that more out of feel, like a lot of people do. But now it's something I kind of do think about a little bit sometimes as I'm warming up. Just as, again, it's your warm-up should not just be something to perceivably get warm, because you're not changing your body temperature at all. In reality, you do need some muscular contractions for some brain things to occur, so you're actually ready for max output. But it's also just a time, it should be a time for practice. It should be a time for rehearsal. And I've said it a whole bunch of places, a whole bunch of times. People really, really neglect that, or at least don't take full advantage of it, where if you actually just spent a little bit more time practicing there, you probably get a lot more out of your actually working sets, not just going through the motions on your warm-up sets. So. All right, guys, so a couple little pieces of advice on this one. First one, explaining, we've done a whole bunch of different tricep exercises, and lots of times it's gonna return to the same 3 or 4 different variations, where it almost always is gonna come back to the isolation movement that we do is going to be cables. In case you're new here, depending on your size, depending on your structure, I'm making up a number, but for most larger individuals, people that weigh over 170, 180 pounds, it's very tough to make barbell and dumbbell exercises line up as far as isolation movements go. Actually, it's easier to line up things that are like heavy close grip presses, dips, things like that. Most people can actually set up in a way that they fit well, but it's things like skull crushers, overhead extensions that I see most likely causing a lot of elbow issues because people just can't make it fit. And the simple test on any of that stuff is if your elbows flare dramatically when you're doing skull crushers, when you're doing overhead extensions, chances are they don't really fit your structure. And not only is that coming from all the clients I've worked with over the past 20 years, well, 20, yeah, almost 20 years, 15 years, we'll say that to be safe, or myself training for over 20 years, is there were lots of times where I felt like, oh, I have perfect form, I've got great control, and didn't really think about this alignment thing a whole lot. So in case you're new here, there's always gonna be some cable movement that is gonna be for our isolated, when I say isolated, meaning just the elbow joint moving, not like a compound type movement. And I should also say, I'm a meathead first and foremost. I would much rather do skull crushers because they're quicker, they're easier to set up. I hate doing all this crap, but it is what it is. The only thing I hate more is having destroyed elbows. And my elbows honestly were worse off 10 years ago than they are right now. So anyway, the cable setup, I'm gonna give you guys a couple of things here. If you wanna dig into these a little bit more, I've done some videos in the past getting a little bit more, but I'm gonna give probably 3-ish tips here just to go over some stuff that might be a little bit different than what you've heard before. So first, if I always get questions about the cuffs, shameless plug, these are my cuffs, link in bio to my shop if you want them. But the reality is I actually was using these cuffs from the same manufacturer for probably 2 or 3 years, and they actually reached out to me and like, hey, we just found out that you're the person why we're selling hundreds of these, because I kept referring them. And they said, you know, we can make some for you. So here we go, they made some. And the nice part is literally the original ones that I had, they still are together. So these are very durable. What the hell is the whole point of having a cuff is for most tricep stuff, one of the biggest reasons that you kind of have this elbow flare type thing is being forced into a fully pronated grip. So imagine me on a straight bar, forced into a pronated grip. Most people don't have, like for me, that's where my, you know, pronation ends. So if I would need to pronate a full 180, my elbows just are gonna have to flare and causes alignment issues. Where if you go with a more neutral grip on anything, even on a skull crusher, so if someone was gonna do a skull crusher variation, I'd say always try and go dumbbells or a bar that has a neutral handle, much easier to line up. So cables are the same thing. I like a neutral grip. This is my favorite way to take a neutral grip. It's basically through the cuff and then grasping the cuff tight. So I have a lot of pressure through the outside of my hand, but then I'm still making a nice strong fist, a nice stable wrist. You'll see when I'm extending, my wrist never moves. If you guys are doing this type of stuff on any extension, not a good thing. So a couple questions are people like, well, what are your other options? You don't have to have these. You could do this, and I've spent a lot of time doing this, but at some point in time, if you're treating these movements the way that you should, progressing them over time, this is a pain in the ass. This gets a little bit painful, and this is probably not the thing to actually create the strongest grip with, trying to hold on to this little skinny piece of cable, and it comes down to having all the pressure basically just in the butt of the hand. Your other option is a rope, and a rope honestly is a pretty good option. I even have some single ones that only go like this, but whenever you're doing stuff where they cross, you'll see basically if we watch back, Trevor will cut in here some of the videos when I'm actually doing them with the 2 cables at the same time. If you do it with a rope, all the shit crosses over. So basically what I mean by that is when you're doing them cross, like these run in, these ball things, these stupid balls. Another example when balls are stupid and serve no purpose, they're just ugly and get in the way. But anyway, back to these balls. And so when you're crossing over, they like literally run into each other, their carabiners run into each other, they like hook together. And honestly, that just annoys the shit out of me. So having that long rope will always have this whole part clanging into the other side of the other rope. Whereas again, if I have the handle, you'll see that normally these are short enough that I can have them cross significantly before these stupid balls run into each other and start to clang and these hook together, and that just pisses me off. So this is a solution, again, that I've been doing for years prior to me trying to sell shit to you on YouTube. I was using the cuffs already just because it was my preference. So that's one. This is the reason that I use cuffs, why it's my favorite for any type of extension stuff. So you'll see sometimes I do these standing and cross, sometimes I do single arm, anytime I do overhead, I almost always go with a cuff. So the other 2 things I'm gonna show you, just so you guys know this stuff isn't arbitrary, is how do I determine this height? So again, assuming I'm keeping my body fixed, the height of this will change the profile of the exercise. I wanna simplify that real fast. So again, assuming if you moving your body position can also affect that, but let's say I wanna keep my upper arm in this position, The higher the cable gets, basically the heavier it is at the bottom. So again, if the cable, imagine, was up to a higher point, whereas going more like this, cables are great because they can show you this is the line of force, and basically 90 degrees from this line of force to my elbow joint will indicate how much torque is there. The load's not changing. The longer the moment arm, this distance is a moment arm. Moment arm times load equals torque at the train joint. So again, the further this gets away, so if I had the cable up higher, you can see when I'm at full extension, that's a longer distance. If you ever did this, you don't have to know all that stupid math to try and sound smart. You would just know that, holy shit, the lockout feels heavier. So if I want to have heavier at the lockout, more tension in the tricep when I'm at this position, which is really more torque at the elbow, I put this higher. If I want it basically heavier, lighter in this position, so again, if this is closer, the closer this gets, the less torque there is. So if I put that lower, then I'm gonna have less torque in this position. It's gonna feel lighter as it comes into the finish. What also matters is when I'm coming into this position where I'm getting through the mid-range and fully lengthened. The reason I set the height that I do is I basically want it heaviest in that position. So again, if you imagine that cable, extend that distance out, this is the moment arm in this case. So I want it heavier where my muscles tend to be stronger. And that's more from a length tension relationship type thing. Muscles tend to be strongest in the mid-range. So this is set up intentionally for this exercise where I want it heaviest here and I want it pretty light here. But if you adjust it, if people say, well, what if I put them lower? What if I put them higher? That would change things. Again, if it was lower, then it would probably be heavier in this position. If it was higher, it would be heavier in this position. And the last thing I want to show is whenever you're doing any type of extension, people will cross the cables all the time. The reason I cross them again is for alignment. What do you mean by alignment? How do I know if it's lined up well? The test is if you're going full extension, pull your arm down so that cable basically is bisecting your arm, most importantly bisecting your elbow joint. So if that runs right through my elbow joint, I know that I'm essentially lined up right. So people do them all the time. I'll see people have the cable set up and they'll be like this or they'll be like this. I'll see people go on here and I can tell, like when I'm watching, even without they setting it up, I can tell this is gonna do a torsion-y thing at the elbow. And if they just test it, they'd say, oh look, that's not lined up at all. So not only is this basically pulling you into flexion, it's also pulling your joint that way, creating this kind of rotation-y, torsion-y type force. So if you're gonna do any cables crossed, the test is take it to full extension and then pull it down wherever you're at. This you can do the same thing standing, make sure it lines up through the elbow joint, and then you just have to stay in plane. So again, you have to move right in that plane. If you lined it up and then go into doing something like this, you might have some weird issues. But if you line it up and stay in that right plane, then that's how you know you have your arms in the right spot. So a couple little tips here. Hopefully one explaining why I do this stupid motion. It's not just to look cool for the gram, but this is basically the skull crusher variation. It's almost the exact same upper arm position as far as amounts of flexion and extension occur. It's just basically, people will talk about scapular plane as well too, which is something to be concerned about. But really what that will translate to, again, from the non-nerd standpoint, is this is gonna feel more comfortable than trying to hold things in tucked in this place, even if you had some cable. So this is going to be the skull crush variation where you have the same amount of upper arm elbow flexion extension, almost the exact same loading pattern as if you were doing skull crushers, just with something that lines up with the elbow joint and that you're going to be able to train, progress for much longer periods of time without smashing those elbows. All right, guys, so moving on. Next pairing, we're doing a JM press variation in the Smith, and we're doing a hammer curl variation here. I've talked about this a little bit before. I'm just gonna give a couple points on this because these are not new movements. Both of these have been kept in my split for a while because one, the JM press I think is one of the best pressing compound movements for triceps. And I always say, I think you should have some curl variation in your program where you have something other than a supinated-ish grip. So whether that's neutral or times pronated, I don't think you need to split hairs, just rotate it every couple months. So I've said that before. If you look across my bicep training, There's always a preacher curl variation. That's always gonna be kind of the big meat and potatoes. That will never come out. Again, it could be machine, could be dumbbell, whatever. There's always some sort of incline curl variation, something getting my upper arm extended behind me, training that bicep in a stretch position. And then the third that rounds it off, again, I think is some different grip position. And that's the one I probably rotate the most. So the one we've got in now is with a single rope and a fat grip. And so again, I like the single rope. Similar things that I've discussed. When doing a neutral grip here, I think the rope makes the most sense as opposed to triceps because you don't have to cross them, stuff doesn't get in the way, but also it allows for the easiest, obviously, neutral position. So even if you took a handle and kind of turned it on its side and had the, the rope of either side of the handle hanging out, it kind of twists and turns, it doesn't line up quite as perfectly. So single rope is great. If you don't have a single rope, take a longer rope. You can just tie one end and not do that deal, or buy yourself some single ropes because these are like 10 bucks. I got them on Amazon, they're nothing fancy. From there, occasionally I like to use things like fat grips. So people always ask my opinion on these things. I'm not sponsored by Fat Grips. I paid for my own money with these. Are they a game changer? No. Are they magical? No. We're putting these on every single handle that you ever use. A good idea? No. Is it a nice variety to use sometimes? Yes. And so all I'm doing here, generally when I'm doing this type of grip, the only thing I'm trying to incorporate is, again, some different elbow flexors, not just the biceps. Get the brachialis, brachioradialis a little bit more involved, so that arguably happens more with a neutral grip and a pronated grip. And then also sometimes I just like a little added grip and form work, and I can make some arguments about what you're grasping having a different impact. I don't really get into that too much, but I just like that for sometimes, again, to have a little bit more forearm and grip stimulus. So you guys don't have to do this whole setup. The only reason also that I do it on cables is, again, that whole alignment thing. Similar to triceps, as you guys do curls with two, fixed bar or anything, so whether it's an easy bar or a straight bar or whatever, the more your elbows want to flare out, so the more your upper arm points out and not straight up and down, I would argue the more likely they are to wreck your elbows. So that's the whole reason I'm doing these, even as opposed to dumbbells. Every once in a while I'll do dumbbells, but if I was going to do a dumbbell hammer curl, I would prefer just doing them one arm at a time, and again, getting that upper arm perpendicular to the ground. So right now, this is just a nice solution, nothing magical, but something that's felt really, really good. Feels good on the wrist, feels good on the elbows, and feels good on everything that I'm trying to train. So we've kept it in for a couple months, and we'll likely keep it in for a little bit as well too. But like I said, feel free to rotate this, sub this. You don't have the whole setup. I'd say probably just do single arm dumbbells is the next best bet. And again, if you've got some extra change, buy some fat grips, buy some knockoff brand fat grips. That's probably cheaper. And again, Amazon's got you. Again, while you're watching this, if you're thinking hard enough, it's being droned to you right now. That tapping on your window is a drone from Bezos delivering you some fat grips. Already charged your account. And I don't know what else he's doing, something creepy. So anyway, nice curl variation here before I got sidetracked, and on to the next one. All right, y'all, so finishing off our last superset today is gonna be an overhead extension variation and an incline curl variation. And again, these are ones, a perfect example of stuff I just kind of rotate. I really only have two different incline curl variations, unless you count seated or standing as one of them. And overhead's one I kind of always mess around with, and always probably will rotate that one more than anything else. So you'll see for the rope extension here, nothing magical. I just basically want my arm, flexed a little bit upper arm, a little bit overhead. It doesn't need to be cranked all the way up here. Somewhere out here is a pretty good spot. So not quite in the exact same position I started with the kind of skull crusher variation. Just gonna have it extended where I can comfortably hold it, flexed where I can comfortably hold it. And again, the whole idea behind that is to get a little bit more length trained out of that long head. So I generally like to finish my workouts or pairings with things that train or overload the muscle in the lengthened position. So that's the reason for this. Again, nothing magical. I just have the two ropes because almost all other things being the same, going from a narrow handle, maybe to just one rope to two ropes will generally give you a little bit more freedom and better alignment. So that's the whole reason on this. That being said, I'm not in love with this movement. So I've said this a couple times. This one might rotate out, but for right now, it's a pretty good fit. And then superset to there, we're just doing some incline curls here. Between these and the cable variation, which you guys have seen me do at some point in time, if I had to pick one, I'd pick the cable variation just because it gives a little bit more versatility as far as loading pattern, alignment, things like that. But I still think this is a good movement. The things that people will see is when I'm in the bottom position, is that dumbbell directly below the elbow? If so, there's little to no torque there in that fully stretched position, but you're so weak. And again, if I'm even keeping my upper arm flexed just a teeny bit, which I am, there's still a teeny bit of torque there. So again, this is still, in my opinion, a good motion to train the biceps in their more lengthened position. And again, if there's one little word of advice I give on this one, when you're deciding where you want to sit and how much of an incline to have, see where you can comfortably get your upper arm as far as perpendicular to the ground before you just set an incline. So I've done the mistake before of like, oh, I want a better stretch. And so in this deal, I lay on back. And again, if this is where I can comfortably extend my upper arm behind me, you know, that's a good, whatever, 20, 30 degrees short of here, where I would need to be. And so what ultimately ends up happening is I've strained myself just letting the weight pull me in that position, which again, if you have a weight pulling you where you can't actively go, probably not a good thing for a lot of stuff. So again, you can come up and you'll see in this position when I lay back, I can much more comfortably get this arm at least very close to perpendicular to the ground. And so again, this is gonna be different for everybody. So just get in here, you know, actively extend your upper arm back, see where it is, and adjust accordingly. So the less you can extend it back, the more inclined you're gonna need the bench to be. Almost no human being has any business taking that bench back 30 degrees. Most people are gonna be better probably 45, 60 degrees somewhere. So just a couple little tips on that. And same structure as everything else. Most things were 2 working sets, top set, back off set fashion. So hope you guys enjoyed this workout. Until the next one, later.